We're back again with Rachel Maddow helping us learn about the Trump cabinet, doing the vetting that the Trump administration refuses to do as he demands the Senate to not even hold hearings for these people. Well, this time we're going to learn a bit about Christy Noem, the pick for Homeland Security, and we can jump right into it.
When Christy Noem's daughter flunked out from the licensing process, Noem told the head of the licensing agency to come to the governor's mansion for a meeting with her and her daughter. The meeting also included the state labor secretary and at least one lawyer for the state labor department, and Christy Noem's own chief counsel to the governor's office and her governor's chief of staff, all summoned to the governor's mansion to meet with the governor herself and the governor's daughter, to talk about the daughter failing the licensing thing. And wouldn't you know it, somehow at that meeting, a path was discovered to offer the governor's daughter an extra chance at getting her license, an unprecedented third chance that nobody else gets. Soon thereafter, Noem's administration forced out the head of the licensing agency who had had the temerity to flunk the governor's daughter in the first place. And we know all of this because the Republican legislature in the state launched an investigation, and then they unanimously approved a report from that investigation finding that Christy Noem's daughter got preferential treatment.
Imagine that, a Republican lawmaker using their position of power to help their child. Wasn't there a Democrat that MAGA was just outraged at doing this over? I can't put my finger on it. Wasn't it like something to do with a pardon for his son? I can't really remember who that was, but you know what's weird is them not having the same level of outrage when it's a Republican doing this. If MAGA thinks this is so wrong, why not the same level of rage at Christy Noem? Why haven't they called her to be disqualified as a Trump pick? Why would they want someone who does something they see as a vile act of corruption in the Trump cabinet? It's almost like they'll just use whatever they can against the Democrats and then never hold the same standard for their own side. I mean, kind of odd, isn't it?
As meatpacking plants in her home state were host to some of the largest single outbreaks of COVID anywhere in the world, Governor Christy Noem insisted that it was just a coincidence that more than 1,000 infected people all worked in the same meat plant. She insisted that no new rules, no new procedures were needed to keep people safe. Christy Noem had South Dakota host nearly 500,000 people for the Sturgis motorcycle rally in 2020 and hundreds of thousands more people the following month at the South Dakota State Fair. By the month after that, South Dakota had one of the worst COVID infection rates in the whole world, and its hospitals were rationing care to try to save their sickest patients. Under Christy Noem's leadership, South Dakota sunk to the worst per capita COVID death rate in the United States and among the worst in the entire world.
I kid you not when I say this, that South Dakota single-handedly did more to prove the legitimacy of COVID than any scientist or health expert ever could. Like, we had a real case study unfold before our eyes where Noem took the completely partisan route of denying it's real, denying it's a legitimate threat, that it's no more dangerous than the common cold. She denied doing quarantine stuff, denied social distancing, denied mask rules and mandates. And what happened? Well, a lot of people died is what happened at a higher rate than most places in the world, let alone just America, with infection rates through the roof. And as Maddow said, this led to South Dakota hospitals becoming quickly overwhelmed and drained of their resources. But again, we're supposed to ignore things like this that happen from the people who didn't follow any of the protocols from COVID and still believe MAGA when they say that COVID was this big overplayed hoax and nothing really to worry about. Now, what you need to focus on here as it's pertinent to Homeland Security is if Noem is going to take partisan approval, just going with what's popular in the party over following the facts, I personally fear for immigrants the next 4 years. Like, no one who can't follow facts shouldn't head an agency. Like, these people are here for their expertise and recommendations, not to just do whatever Trump wants.
In the same book where she bragged about killing her puppy, Christy Noem also wrote this, quote, "I remember when I met with the North Korean dictator, Kim Jong-un. I'm sure he underestimated me, having no clue about my experience staring down little tyrants. Quote, I'd been a children's pastor after all." And that is very cute. That is also totally made up. Christy Noem never met with North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, let alone stared him down or helped him pick Bible verses or whatever. I don't know. Didn't happen. When asked for details of this supposed meeting, Christy Gomes' spokesperson said the book contained a couple of small errors that would be corrected in future editions of the book.
So also speaking to the character of the people Trump is nominating, she not only shot and killed her dog in cold blood before looking at her cat and saying, "You're next." Okay, I do want to say that part is a joke about the cat, but that's just how I see it happening, right? But she did also lie about meeting a North Korean dictator for shits and giggles, it seems, which is weird because I specifically remember MAGA trying to make a big deal of Tim Walz going to China with his students, or it was like on his honeymoon or whatever it was. This was major, right? But then they're like, hell yeah, what a badass, when a Republican is like, yeah, I cozied up to North Korean dictators. It all makes no sense to me. Where's the consistency here, right? It just, again, goes to show that this moral standard the right pretends it has when they can use it against the left falls short of any measure of how they look at or view their own side. They just coincidentally don't have the same rage when it's their side that doesn't live up to these expectations. And that's why you can't take these people serious. If they can't even capitulate these things, they're unserious people. I still remember MAGA in my comments, for instance, they talking about like the 2020 election being stolen, saying, well, no matter what party won, I would be saying voter fraud, right? Like obviously either party in power and you just can't trust them and da-da-da-da-da. And Trump wins, not a peep. Nobody says anything. I mean, specifically Trump on election day was crying about voter fraud in Pennsylvania the morning of. Then the second he wins Pennsylvania, he just stops mentioning it. And now none of them it's not even spoken, right? Now imagine if Kamala had said, well, I did hear from Trump that there was possible voter fraud in Pennsylvania, and then went on to refuse to certify the election as the vice president. Like the outcry MAGA would have from this, despite that being their little argument for Mike Pence, is astounding. Like these standards just don't hold up for them.